All right, so the next part, we're gonna kind of get into like the prime cuts. I'm gonna show you how to do a backstrap the way I like to do it, especially on a deer this fat. The trick to utilizing the fat on deer is it goes rancid the longer it's exposed to oxygen. So if you're gonna do a long age on a deer, you leave the hide on, then you can use the fat after the long age. This deer's only been aging about 4 or 5 days, so they're usually still all right then. You just never want to freeze deer with fat on it. 'Cause even in the freezer, that stuff will keep breaking down and changing, and that's that gamey flavor no one likes. So I never say the fat in here. This is like that kidney fat, that hard waxy stuff. And you can feed that to the birds if you want. And this is just your tenderloin in here. Usually I cut these out right when I kill the deer. And you can kind of uncover it once you trim all this out of the way. Now that the hind leg's gone, you can really see a lot of guys don't come up high enough to get to the head of that. They'll end up cutting here or something. You're losing a pretty good fraction of your tenderloin that way. It actually comes up pretty high. So I'll reach up here, kind of start separating it, and then on that side. And that's kind of all that I really cut. I don't like to do too much to it. Once you get the head, what I would call the head of it started, that's the only like real connection in there that's going to give you a hard time. It's just like peeling it out of there. It's literally like in a little pocket of its own. So you'll see now it's starting to fall out. If I keep putting pressure down with this hand, if the deer's hot, I've actually pulled them out of there without a knife when I'm gutting the deer. But for the sake of saving as much meat as you can, it's good to take your time on these, because this is the best, probably the best thing, at least for the grill, what we would think is the best. This little strip on the outside, I usually grind that. The rest of that's just a little bit of fat, but that's a solid piece of meat, tenderloin. If you're gonna age your deer with the tenderloins in, which I never do for more than 3 or 4 days, unless I'm shooting a video to show you how to take them out, you'll see that dark spot. That's from it aging. I tried to leave as much of that kidney fat on it as I could because I knew I was gonna do that. But these don't benefit from being aged at all, in my opinion. Eat them the day you kill your deer, or take them out the day you kill your deer and eat them within 5 or 6 days. So that'll be ground. The other one got taken out last night. It's already gone. So once you got your tenderloin loose and you don't have to worry about cutting into it, in order to cut the rack, you'll see the ribs don't start till here, but we've got backstrap. So if you come up here, the ribs start right here, but you got backstrap from that dimple on his hip to there. So if you were to buy beef at the store and they were selling porterhouse or anything out of this would be called a short loin, this is where it would be. So to cut the boneless section, because you don't really have rib bone there, I start at the first rib that I can see, and I get my knife, and see, I'm touching that rib the whole time I'm going through with the knife. You want to be close. And I'll run that all the way till I hit the spine. See that peak? That's the spine underneath all that fat. Then I'll come in, I'm going to uncover this for you so you can see it without cutting myself. There's where the pelvis stopped, the hip, whatever you want to call it. You could see that bump. This is squishy, that's hard bone. So literally right up against that is where your back strap's gonna start. And now you'll cut over the spine again. So you made 2 cuts. You made one straight across, one across here. So now it's loose on top and bottom. The next cut, and with a deer that's really fat, you gotta watch this because your knife can get away from you. You wanna go right in as close to the spine as you can get and just ride that thing all the way down. You can see my knife's literally flexing because I'm putting pressure up against that spine. Most guys know how to cut out a back strap, but this is the way I do it. So once that's loose, you can start getting it moving. Usually once it's out and you can see where it ends, and I'll just cut right there just to leave that waste on there. That way I don't have to trim everything. And now it should peel right out. Start right there. I usually age my deer in the walk-in, which I'm lucky enough to have, for 12 days, if it's a big deer. By the time that 12 days is up, this thing will pull right out away from the bone. It's not mushy, it's shrunk, it's lost water weight, so it's a lot easier to bone a deer out. It's been aged. This deer's only been hanging for a couple days shy of a week. So there's that trimming part. And now that it's started, same thing as the tenderloin. With your free hand, just keep giving it pressure. You don't want to rush here. So he's got a really nice wide back. Keep working your trim off. And now you've met your cut down here, your lower cut. So you've got a short loin with a fat cap on it. If this thing was really fresh and I wasn't already going to cut the rack off, I might leave this on and truss it with some butcher's twine and cook it over like a charcoal fire with the fat on if it was fresh. The other trick to deer fat, other than worrying about when it's going to go rank, is eating it hot. You don't want to like let it get back to room temp because it's got a really high melting point. Like duck fat will be liquid at 80 degrees, less than 80, but pretty much if it's warm, it's liquid. Deer fat's like over 120. So as soon as it falls off of where you cooked it at, it's gonna get waxy. So you gotta eat it really hot, and that's why I like open fire methods. But anyway, long story short, we're gonna discard this. So you'll see, almost looks like a piece of bacon. But you can get your fingers in between there for this upper portion and kind of just start peeling it. If it's been aged a long time, like I said, all this stuff's a lot easier because moisture's already been pulled away. But this thing's gonna come off your back strap like this. If you get to a spot, I mean, you don't want to tear your meat, so use your knife. But what I've found is that thing's like a piece of leather and it'll come right off. So the only thing that would be left to do on this back strap is trim this edge off right here. This kind of connective stuff. Then you got another layer. Okay. So you'll see there's another muscle right here actually within that strap. gonna come over here and trim it off. Those are just those outside trim pieces that we have. Now you've got a uniform piece of meat. This outer edge on a back strap, that kind of trim stuff, that's your chain. You can grind that into burgers. They call it the chain. So now you're left with just this silver skin on the strap. So with a sharp knife, with a kind of flexible blade, you want to start just like you're taking the skin off of fish. Once you get a tab started, you can kind of get your knife along there, and it's tough stuff, so you can put some pressure on it with your blade. You're not going to cut through it as easy as you think, just like a fish skin. So I'll get a handle on it here, my knife's down there, and I'll just keep moving my knife back and forth. Sometimes you got to readjust your grip, but if you drag your knife through there, you can see we're really starting to get it off. You want to be careful in here. If you cut too deep or whatever, you're gonna start taking like little 1/8 inch slices out of your back strap at a time. You don't want to do that. It's better if you can see that you're just taking pure silver skin off, but sometimes that's hard to do. But for the most part, that thing's pretty well trimmed up. I'm gonna take this long, tough edge off. That's pretty much a perfect trimmed piece. Before cooking, I'll go back over these again, but usually I'm more worried about them getting warm by the time they're perfect. So for the freezer, that's plenty trimmed for me. Okay, so the next one, so now you got your short loin. The next part we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this bone-in rack. I don't think a lot of people do this, and I actually just started doing it a couple years ago. I first did it with an elk, and then I started trying it with deer, and it's just balloons from there. I think it's awesome. So if you look at your rib cage, like when you get a rack of lamb, those rib bones are free. But if you actually look inside of here, your ribs connect to like a plate. I think what they actually do call the plate. So I like to take my bone saw and do this before you do anything else with this. When you're at this step, you gotta saw this. If the shoulder's on, it seems to hold the rib cage better. I've peeled the shoulder off first and it didn't work as good. So your first rib bone, if you look from the top, if you want them to be about that long, that's where you want to start, because they're going to keep getting longer as you go. So I like a long rib bone just for presentation purposes. So I'll get started and I'll just keep sawing straight down through until I hit the brisket down here. Okay, so that's kind of like pretty much as far as I'm going to get where we want to go. And I'll split them down the breast. This is going to end up being like pretty much your short ribs of your deer. This section right here's got the most meat on top of the ribs. If you were going to try some bone-in rib stuff, I've tried it. It's good. I like to strip them off though. Strip the meat off of them and grind it. I do like to save it though. So that's out of the way for now. The next part, so pretty much you've cut in on the first rib, you've trimmed the end of the ribs. Now you're going to do the same thing you did with your boneless section of backstrap. you're gonna get along the spine and keep feeling along the spine. We're just loosening the back strap before we cut the bone. Make sure that that cut goes to the base where the ribs come off. You can see my knife has cut a clean line. So that's all loose down in there now. The last part is going to be, I get a sharp hatchet. This is my favorite. And I'll just, see, it's hard for me because I'm left-handed and I'm starting on the left side. But I'll put pressure down on the rib and I'll get this thing started. Once you break the first rib off, now you can kind of just tap your way down there. See. Keep tapping. You're running into your finger bones up here, so it's kind of a pain at first. But once that thing starts peeling, now it's coming. Sometimes you don't cut far enough with your knife, so you'll come back in and clean that up. You don't want that pulling apart any more than it needs to. We'll come back. From the inside, you can kind of see that whole rack is peeling away from the spine. I usually go until I hit the edge of the shoulder blade. To me, that's the end of my loin. So you'll see my shoulder blade kind of comes up in here. So I'll come down here and I'll cut around it. And then the connection cut will be to come up your last rib of your rack. You want to stay right along that rib. And then you'll see, here's the head of your rib where you chop through with the axe. Sometimes it'll be harder than others, depending on how far into there you were splitting it. This one was split pretty far, so this is where the axe is nice because I can just give that one little tap and split it. You can see how sharp this thing is. You want it to be super sharp. Okay. Now here's the final part. You want to get this away from your shoulder. You don't want to mess up your shoulder roast. So all I did there, I was just cutting along the edge of the shoulder to peel that out. You'll see your back strap starting to get a lot of connective tissue in the cross section there. That's because you're getting into the neck and out of loin. It's a slow change. Okay. So now that you got your rack, it pretty much looks like a lamb chop there. And you'll see these are split all the way down. They're pretty clean too. You might have some bone shards and stuff you want to get out of there. But for the most part, that axe does it's the closest thing you can get to having a bandsaw. And they're easy to sharpen. I'd recommend getting a stone for it if you do. If you do get one, to keep it extra sharp. So the last part of this is now you kind of just got this huge rack covered in fat. Kind of looks a little sloppy. So I'll look at it from the side and I'll eyeball where my loin stops and the ribs start. I'll score that with my knife all the way down and across to the other side. So I might go like this. Straight line. everything south of that line is going to get boned out. So we got a little bit of shot damage in there. So it's good that we cut that out like that. And then I'll kind of try and clean this up just a little bit. Like that had a little bit of blood on it. This edge looks like it got dry. And then just try and think about how much fat and stuff is actually on there. For this deer, there's a lot. All right, so now you've kind of got it cleaned up somewhat. You want to come in here and just start cleaning out your finger bones. So we're going down on the rib to the line that we cut. Now we're going to go down on that rib line and cut that out of there. So sometimes we'll say this is a Frenched roast, standing rib roast. Basically, they're referring to the bones being cleaned off here. And it's just a presentation thing. See, we're gonna lose one of these ribs from the broadhead. See, that one got cracked. Kind of a bummer. That would have been a pretty one, but when you come right in here. Now, this is obviously going to take you some time to just clean these off. It's all in how you want to present it. This rack method, though, does yield a better result if you're eating it fresh, in my opinion. For one, you're cooking the whole subprimal, section of backstrap whole. You want this thing to get warmed up out of the fridge before you put it on your grill. It's a big piece of meat, so let it come up to room temp, dry it off with a paper towel, and then coat it with the seasoning that you want. You want to go hot and fast. Now, deer fat is like gas on a fire, so keep that in mind. Keep your lid open on your grill and keep an eye on it, because you'll torch it pretty quick if you're not careful. So if I was going to serve this to some people, these would be cleaned up even more so, but I think you get the gist of it. So there's your standing rib roast of venison. Now, another thing you could do, you could peel this whole thing off, this whole cap off, trim it out just like a backstrap, and now you just kind of got these little lollipop chops. But if you want to experience the fat and mess with that a little bit, I'd recommend leaving it on and trying it. I like it, I do, but you can trim that out. You don't have to leave the fat on it just because that's the way we're doing it here. But I mean, that'd be a heck of a party platter right there. So that's that. And then here's the short loin, the upper part of it. So you kind of got two different things going on. Now, if you wanted to do boneless all the way down just like this, you would have just kept doing the same thing you were doing top to bottom, down to where we cut the bone-in rib roast out of the shoulder. Take the back strap all the way down there too. So that's your loin and your tenderloin.